Very good morning, sir. Gautam this side.
Hello, Gautam. Good morning. Nice to
So
meet you.
we'll begin with, I'll introduce you to the batch, and then we can start the session.
Sure.
Yes. So on behalf of the batch of XLRI PGDM 2021-22, we're extremely excited to welcome our guest speaker, Mr. Ramachandran S, for the XLRI Industry Expert Connect series. Mr. Ramachandran is a principal consultant in the thought leadership team in Infosys, the Knowledge Institute. He's the lead for manufacturing and engineering domains. Mr. Ram has more than 24 years of experience in the digitization for industrial applications, and his keen topics of interest are Industry 4.0, sustainability, servitization, and future work. He's a regular blogger and speaker on these topics across multiple channels. He's co-authored a book titled Neoskilling for Digital Transformation with Professor Prasad, IIM Bangalore, published by Wiley India. He's a mechanical engineer with a master's in production engineering and an executive MBA, PGPEM from IIM Bangalore. We're extremely excited to host Mr. Ramachandran S for this session. Welcome, sir. The floor is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gautam. A very good morning to all of you. Very happy to meet you all virtually. So I think there's a little bit of background noise. It should go away in a few minutes. So please excuse me for that. Also, my apologies. There was a small change in this schedule. Some unexpected travel came up. So thanks to XLRI for this wonderful opportunity to interact with all of you and to share my thoughts on lifelong learning. So that's the topic for today's session, because change is happening so fast, as all of you are aware, both in the industrial world, in education, globally, across all sectors. Is my audio okay?
So there's a bit of disturbance, but it'll be, I think it'll be fine in a few minutes, as you said. So
yeah, correct. So yeah, yes. Please excuse me for that. Yeah. So the topic for today's session is lifelong learning. And the reason for that is there is too much of change happening. The pace at which change is happening is so much today. So it makes us all go towards lifelong learning. So in order to have a relevant long-term career, we need to start believing in lifelong learning. So my own career is an example for such lifelong learning. As Gautam said, if you briefly look at my career, I started in hardcore manufacturing on the shop floor in Hindustan Motors. I was a production engineer there. That's where I started my career. And then I got a chance to be a research student. And then that's when I shifted my career to General Electric, where I got into technology implementation for hardcore manufacturing and engineering. So I was part of programs like product lifecycle management, reliability engineering. And then the next change in my career was when I became an analyst, when I became a consultant in IDC. IDC is a market research firm, again, specifically for manufacturing insights. So in my own career, I have felt the need to reskill myself, to learn new skills, because I sort of hit a dead end in my career, right? So I had to learn new skills. I had to take some risks. So I'm not saying my career is a perfect, but I'm saying I'm one example of such changes in career. But I kept building upon my skills, right? I did not completely jump into a new career. Again, the Executive MBA that I did at IIM was a big turning point. It helped me so much to get the background on the financial side, just like how most of you are doing, right? So whenever I felt the need to relearn new skills, I used to do a lot of introspection. So the book that Gautam mentioned, the book about reskilling I wrote, is an outcome of that introspection. So I'll talk more about that book also. So in today's session, we'll look at two broad topics. We will look at the why part, right? Why is everybody talking about lifelong learning, right? Why is it so important today? It's mainly because digitization is becoming affordable. It has become so miniaturized. So as human beings, we always keep innovating. So obviously in business world also, there is going to be a lot of innovation. So many roles are getting redundant. Many industries are becoming redundant. Maybe even entire sectors can get wiped out. So that's the why part. We'll start looking at why we need to believe in relearning, in lifelong learning, and how do we, that's the second part. Second part will come to how can we practice lifelong learning, right? So all of you are the future leaders of corporate India. You are going to head large organizations. Some of you are going to become entrepreneurs. You are going to lead your large teams. and even for your own career, right? You need to see how you can practice lifelong learning. How do you observe what are the trends, what are the changes happening in the industry, and how do you practice lifelong learning? Because today, if you see, there is a lot. Yeah.
So just one point. So you can ask Priyanka to change the slides if you want.
Yeah. Is that too much noise?
No, sir. So I'm saying you can ask Priyanka to change the slides. It's still on the first slide. So if you want us to change the slides, we'll change them.
Yeah, I'll tell her to change the
Yes,
slides. No. Sure. Yeah. No issue. I'll tell her to change the slides. Yeah. So today there is a lot of negative news around job market, right? We hear a lot of stories about layoffs. There is a lot of worry about automation taking away jobs. At the same time, there is a big demand supply gap, right? If you see the type of job openings that get posted, we keep hearing about from business leaders, from HR leaders, from hiring leaders that they don't get the necessary skill sets that are available. So isn't that an irony? On one side, we are worried about too much job loss. If you look at automotive industry, we say electric vehicles are going to replace internal combustion engines and many jobs will get wiped out. Electric vehicles may not need so many humans to work on it. On the other side, so I was talking about the negative part of it. There's a lot of negative news about jobs getting obsolete, going away. At the same time, there's this demand supply gap. So the reality is that there is going to be a lot of changing of job types. Some roles will get redundant while new jobs get created. So I'll give you an automotive example specifically about that. Okay, so that's the topic for today's session. So let's dive into the session itself. Priyanka, if you could go to the next slide. So before we start the session, I had a question for you, right? So where does Apple do most of its manufacturing? As all of us know, Apple is a very well-respected company. Its market cap is very high. Its products are very well respected. It's doing a lot of revenue. It's very profitable. That answer is very obvious. It does most of its manufacturing in China. The situation may be slightly different now after the post-pandemic, but still it's not going away. So my question for you is, what is the reason? Why do you think Apple is doing most of its manufacturing in China? Right? So in the interest of time, we may not have time for a poll or for your answers, but all of you have your own answers. You may say it's because of tax benefit. It could be because of cheap labor or better infrastructure. But if any of you have those answers, those are not the answers I'm looking for. Or more importantly, our opinion doesn't matter, right? I'll tell you what Tim Cook said. So let's park this question for now. I'll come back to this answer towards the end of the session. Why does Apple do most of its manufacturing in China? So if you could go to the next slide, Priyanka. So this is the agenda for today's session. So let's park this question now on the Apple part. Why does its manufacturing in China? So this is the agenda for today's call. Like I said, we will start with looking at why we need to practice lifelong learning, because we should all be convinced ourselves that it's really required. Only then you can practice it, and you can also lead your teams once you get into corporate world. And for the why part, there are two basic things, right? We need to change our education and we need to change our industry. So we'll briefly look at how education is changing, how can you contribute to it, and also the industry part. The third part is the government part, which we will not get into. Those are for policymakers. That's beyond the scope of this call. And then we will look at the role of automation, because again, when we talk about computing becoming affordable, the outcome of that is automation. So several jobs today are getting automated. Automation has become very affordable. So I'll give you a framework which we can use to see what are the type of jobs that are liable to get automated. And what do you do with that? Again, you are the future business leaders. It will help you prepare for both for you individually and also for your team. Because towards the end, I'll touch upon the triple bottom line, right? So John Elkington formed this very popular term called 3P or triple bottom line. Today, business leaders are not good leaders if they focus only on the bottom line or the profit part. They should also focus on the planet part, where there's so much of focus on sustainability today. And the third P is about the people, which is all about today's session, right? So as business leaders, we need to make sure people are employable. You deal with them responsibility. We spoke about the negative news about layoffs. We don't want all that. So we'll look at the role of automation. Then we will look at skills and lifelong learning, and how do you do your career planning, and take some Q&A at the end. Yeah, next slide, Priyanka. And this is the book that I had co-authored with Professor Prasad. This was around 2-3 years back. And just to share with you, the origin of this was actually a blog which I wrote on LinkedIn. So like I said, I spoke about my career progression. So when I became an analyst in IDC, I used to write a lot of regular blogs. One of the blogs, like I said, was when I started doing some introspection on how can people practice lifelong learning. All of us, many of us during a mid-career crisis, we may hit a dead end in our career, right? We may find the skills that we have becoming obsolete. So who will bear the cost of reskilling? So the three key players there are individuals, ourselves, the industry, and the government. So that got me thinking. I wrote a blog about it, and then I approached Professor Prasad, and he agreed to do this book jointly. So that's this. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. Yeah. So now, why is this? Why is there so much focus today on lifelong learning and skill development? It is basically because of the rate of change. Because we have always had change. If you look at human evolution, we say change is only constant. But the only problem is today. If you hit next, Priyanka, it's an animated slide. Yeah. So if you look at the industry is going at the pace of a rabbit. But if you look at the technology providers, they are moving at a speed of a tortoise or a turtle. So there is this big mismatch between speed at which technologies are developing. At the same time, there is a gap in technology providers. Technology providers could be education institutions, it could be service providers like Infosys, Wipro, TCS. This gap in pace and the rapid pace at which technology is galloping is one of the main reasons. So again, we will, as professionals, as management professionals, we should ask questions, right? Why is technology really developing? At what speed is it developing? So we will get to that. So here are some examples just to show you how fast technology is galloping. Right? So Tesla, as you know, is a very respected company in the auto industry. Its valuation is much more than all the big Detroit, the traditional OEMs put together. I am talking about artificial intelligence. Google today has a mobile app which can be used to perform diabetic retinopathy. It can take a photo of your retina and tell you what is the risk of diabetes that you have. And if you look at UPI and digital payment channels that are there in India, it has helped so much during COVID. One gentleman I was talking to was saying that if COVID had happened before all these digital payments had come, our economy would have had a bigger hit. So we were not dependent on SWIFT. Demonetization did not hurt us. So that's how fast peer-to-peer payment is happening digitally. Without going to a bank, I can send an amount to my friend or to my family members, right? So that's the reason for digital transformation happening so fast. So let's go to the next slide. So let's go deeper into it. So when we say technology is changing fast, how fast is it really happening? So one law that helps us understand it is Moore's law, right? So most of you would have heard about it. Gordon Moore was the CEO of Intel in the 60s. A journalist asked him, what do you think will be the future of computing? And he made a very bold statement. He never thought it would hold good for so many decades. He said the power of computing is going to double every 2 years. The cost is going to keep falling. So that became the popular Moore's law. Just to give you a perspective, right? The picture, the black and white picture you see here, this was used for census purposes in New York sometime in the 60s. And this is what is called a UNIVAC computer. Yeah, if you hit space, Priyanka. Now, if you see this whole room, the storage that is there, the computing that is there, all this can be done in a smartphone. That's how much computing has progressed. So Moore's law is one way of understanding the rate at which computing is progressing. And the other two factors are communication and storage itself. Yeah, space again, Priyanka. So there are two more laws for that. If you look at Nielsen's law, right? So Nielsen's law talks about the power of communication. Yeah. So it says broadband connections will grow by 50% every year. And we see that already happening. 5G is becoming all pervasive. It is opening up new use cases, probably even new industries. And Kreider's law talks about storage, where the disk drive density will double every 13 months. So if you take these three together, it's such a deadly combination. We have Moore's law, which talks about computing. Nielsen's law talks about broadband and communication, wireless communication. Kreider's law talks about storage, where cloud-based computing is so cheap. A USB thumb drive can store so much of data. So with these three things put together, you can imagine the amount of innovation that can happen. Again, like I said, humans, we always look for faster ways, better ways, cheaper ways of doing things. When these three things are available, it is inevitable that new business models are going to emerge and old models will go away. Yeah, so that's the why part. And as a follow-up of this, next slide, Priyanka. So we see this cliched statement saying data is becoming the new oil, right? So maybe because of Ukraine war, there's again focus on oil. So crude oil is crude oil. The power of that is not going to go away. But then there is so much of power behind data, right? So a lot of examples here, some of them are controversial examples. Cambridge Analytica controversy, for example, in US, it was said that social media was used to influence the voter behavior. At the same time, we in India, we had topics like IRCTC evaluation. The data that is there in IRCTC evaluation when we book tickets, that is so much valuable. They even thought of going for an IPO. So these technologies like Internet of Things, these are technologies which generate data. They have already proven their capability. We have big data tools that are available, databases have been around. So the challenge that businesses are facing today is to monetize the value of this data. So that's where again, B school graduates like you will play a very important role in realizing the value of this data. And here, when we talk about data, that's where we came up with a framework called a Minimec trap in the book on Neoskilling. So me and Professor Prasad coined this term. So we said data is fine, but then it should not be used for wrong purposes. There is not a single day that goes by where you don't hear about wrong usage of data, right? It could be because of privacy concerns. It could be because of integrity. So we formed this term called a Minimec trap. The book is available on Amazon if anyone is interested. So one of the frameworks we covered is Minimec trap, which stands for myopic, intellectually impoverished, and ethically challenged trap, right? So business leaders should not be myopic, focus only on quarterly earnings. We spoke about the triple bottom line. So they need to have a medium term to long term perspective about both their enterprise and also the bigger society. And then there should be intellectual property. But most importantly, we said data should be used ethically, because today we see a lot of issues around ethics when we talk about data. Artificial intelligence, for example, hiring tools, Amazon realized much later that it had a bias for male candidates, which is an ethical issue. So there have been such unknown instances. There have been known instances also, like Volkswagen's Dieselgate scandal, where data was intentionally fudged. Even in very respected Japanese companies in steel, automotive industry, there was fudging of data. So data may be the new oil. Some agree with it, some don't agree with it. But the important thing here is to make sure that it is not used for wrong purposes. Right? Yeah, let's go to the next slide. So as a result of this immense increase in computing power, which is becoming affordable, data is becoming so valuable. So here are some examples of how businesses have completely become extinct, right? So camera with film roll is no longer there. Today, nobody goes around even with a digital camera. It's just a smartphone. Physical media has given way to digital media. Internal combustion engines are going to be replaced by electric vehicles. And if you look at some of the roles, right, if you think of our parents' generation, we had job roles like a clerk, a typist, an accountant. Those roles are all gone today. So the bottom line, as we keep saying, is change is the only constant. Right? Yeah, let's go to the next slide. So that was the why part. Now let's see how can we address this. So the two important levers here are education and industry. Right? So when we look at education, we are in a very interesting time when national education policy is getting rolled out. Dr. Kasturi Rangan and team have spent a significant amount of time to define the new education policy. I'm sure most of you would be aware of it. So here are some of the key takeaways of the new education policy. It insists a lot on practical skills, right? So it is not enough if you just do theoretical courses, correct? So we will look at the types of learning that are important. But one important thing here for me, if you look at the Indian education system, is whether it's in engineering or commerce or science or even in management, we somehow don't seem to focus much on lab work. We focus much on the theory part. So that should be flipped. So the attention, the focus should be more on skills and less on theory. So that's where new education policy encourages people to do a lot of courses, let's say on MOOCs platforms. You can get the necessary credit for it. There is some quota for it. So NEP is very interesting and evolving for those of you who are interested in the HR type of career. I'm sure it will be of immense interest for you. For education sector, how is it going to shape the new graduates who are going to come out in the next few years and going forward? So national education policy is one lever which government has used to bring about this sort of lifelong learning. If you go to the next slide. So Professor Anant Agarwal has given a very interesting model, which is called, he calls it the inverted pan model. So Professor Anant Agarwal is a professor in MIT. He is a founder and currently the CEO of MOOCs platform called edX. So I had the pleasure of meeting him a few times. We interviewed him for a book chapter we are working on. So this chart that you see here, the green line that you see, right, that is what he calls the inverted pan model. So it's like a frying pan that is used to invert it. This is how you get. So before COVID-19, education was sort of mixed, right? And now he says it's going to become hybrid. Hybrid education is going to be the future of education. So that's the inverted pan model. And another very popular professor, Professor Clayton Christensen, made a very strong statement. He said many universities in US may go bankrupt looking at the way education is going. So you see a lot of foreign universities who want to set up shop in India. Education as a sector itself is facing a lot of challenge. So I'm not saying formal education is not important. It is definitely important, but we have to make sure that we insist on skills when we undergo this training, both as individuals and as leaders, as professors, right? Yeah. So yeah, let's go to the next slide, please. So that's talking about the why part. So in fact, many companies like IBM and Google today don't insist really on a degree certificate, right? There are other ways of showing that you possess a necessary skill set, whether it is for a mobile app development or big data or artificial intelligence. There is a lot of data available. Many open source packages are available. There are many ways for you to demonstrate that you can work on those. So this is just as in Infosys, in IT as a sector, but every other sector is getting more and more skill focused. So let's go deeper into that. So we looked at the why part. We looked at how education is changing to adapt to the new demands of the industry. Now let's come to the industry part. So when we talk about industry and skill-based world, there are broadly two sets of skills, hard skills and soft skills. This is an interesting set of skills which World Economic Forum shared. So it's not only about hard skills. Hard skills are your machine learning using R or using Python, robotic process automation, cloud. These are all the technical skills which are hard skills. But today it's very, very important for us to also pick up soft skills. So here are some examples of soft skills that World Economic Forum has recommended. Creativity, problem solving, critical thinking. I would say even basic things, especially for professionals like India, where many of us come from small towns, we may not have had a good chance for communication, whether it's oral communication or written communication. So even those type of skills are very, very important. These skill sets were released before the COVID pandemic, but after the pandemic, these soft skills like communication have become even more important for us. So as professionals, we need to have a balance between both skills and make sure we focus even on the soft skills part. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. So if you look at learning itself, right, I look at it as a hierarchy. It starts with basic learning, which is the lectures. What you're listening to is a lecture. You attend your classroom sessions. There are some assessments and evaluations following it. That's a very basic of education. But now today, education is shifting to more of experiences, right? You have to take your lab work seriously, you take your projects, your internship in industry bodies outside. So education becomes an experience. That's where it becomes active learning, right? So this is, if you're not aware of it, so active learning is very important for you when we talk about lifelong learning. So what active learning says is we cannot just be a passive listener to lectures and learn from that. Instead, you need to practice what is taught. You need to keep it an interactive session. You need to introspect and ask back questions, discuss among yourselves. That's when passive learning becomes active learning. And then the next level is when it really gets into you, right? You are able to retain it. You engage in discussions. You have your own point of view. You debate about it. That's when it's called intentional learning. So intentional learning is when every opportunity to learn is seen as education. Education need not happen only in classrooms. You could be interacting with somebody in a conference. You could be reading a blog. You could be interacting on social media. So every such opportunity to learn should be used to pick up new skills. That's called intentional learning. So education has to slowly progress from just lectures to active learning and to intentional learning. And eventually it becomes a skill-based learning. Leadership is also one such skill. And the ultimate is what I would call a it becomes networking, right? Today, social networking, professional networking, both with your professors, even after you graduate. I'll talk about, how do you be in touch with your alma mater. So relationships with your classmates, with your peers, with friends, industry leaders, that becomes very important. So this is what I call the hierarchy of learning, where learning doesn't just stop with attending lectures, but it becomes active learning, it becomes intentional learning, and eventually you are able to contribute back to the society. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. So next slide. Yeah, so let's get into the role of automation now. Like I said initially, we looked at why we need to believe in lifelong learning, and then we looked at how we can make lifelong learning happen through education, and now we are looking at the industry part. So one fallout of this affordability of computing is automation, right? So many jobs are getting automated today, whether it's a desktop job or a factory job happening in a factory. Today, it's easier to get it done with an algorithm or with a robot instead of hiring humans to do it. And there are several advantages when we go with automation. The machines are not going to ask for a holiday. They are not going to ask for a tea break or a coffee break. So this is again a framework which we published in the book on Neoskilling. If you ask me, this could probably be one of the big takeaway for you on this call. So if you look at all the jobs that are available in any particular company or in an industry, let's take automotive or healthcare. So all these jobs can be bucketized into this 2 by 2. Right? So one of my professors in IIM Bangalore, Professor Krishna Sundar, used to say, the biggest takeaway that management education gave to the world is probably a 2 by 2. So a 2 by 2 is a very useful tool. I'm sure all of you will be using it. So on the x-axis is novelty. Novelty is about decision making and how much of decision making is involved in a particular job. On the y-axis is programmability or repeatability. Can you do a job? Can you represent it as a sequence of steps so that a numerically controlled machine or robot can be programmed to do it? So when we look at all jobs that are there in the company along these two axes, programmability and novelty, there are these 4 categories. If you look at the top left category, that's where automation is very high. These jobs are very high on programmability. They are very low on novelty. So these type of jobs are what are called routine jobs. So there is very little decision making. It's just a sequence of steps that has to be followed. It could be an assembly job. It could be like delivering a medicine in a hospital. These type of jobs are at a very high risk of getting automated using machines and algorithms. So when we talk about triple bottom line as business leaders, from an employability, from a human empathy perspective, we need to make sure these people are reskilled. And if you look at the bottom left category, these are craft jobs, which are low on both programmability and on novelty. So I've shown a carpenter here. It could be a business analyst, it could be an architect type of role, a technical architect. There are other equivalent roles in every industry. These jobs are most difficult to automate. They will not go away. Unfortunately, the number of such jobs may not be very high. And if you look at the top right quadrant, those are jobs which are very high on both programmability and on novelty. So professional technology, I have shown a doctor here, even some of a doctor's jobs like analyzing an X-ray, for example, or a scan output, right, looking for a cancerous tissue or a fracture in an X-ray. Those type of jobs are better performed by computers and algorithms today. So some of the tasks of doctors will get replaced. Doctors will never get replaced. And again, I have a very strong point of view that future of work will definitely involve humans. I don't think we are going to have humanless factories or offices, at least in the Indian context. We always make sure humans play a role in it. And if you look at the bottom right quadrant, these are jobs that are very heavy on decision making, but low programmability, like a scientist job. These jobs also will not get automated. So we need to have a perspective of among all jobs that are there in the company, how many jobs are in which category. And if there is a high number of jobs in the routine one, then there is a very high risk of these jobs getting automated. The company may go obsolete very soon, right? Or maybe even the industry itself. So these should be identified quickly, and the necessary skill set should be identified. There are many ways of imparting skill sets. Of course, for business leaders today, large-scale skill development itself is a big challenge. But then, as business leaders, companies which identify this early and take steps to reskill their people will definitely have a competitive advantage. Yeah, so if you can go to the next slide, Priyanka. Can you move to the next slide, Priyanka? Yeah. So this is how these jobs should be moved around. Routine jobs are at the highest risk of getting automated. They should be moved around. Yeah. So now let's take a particular example from the automotive industry. So the earlier two slides was about Perro's classification effort. It was a very generic one. So you may ask me, where are the numbers? Give me a particular industry. So this is McKinsey's estimate of how this job shift is actually going to happen in the automotive industry. So if you look at the top left, right, that shows the number of jobs that are available today. And on the right, on the left side, you see the jobs that are going to be lost because of automation. So McKinsey says around 20 to 30% of jobs in auto industry will go away. And the most affected are marketing, sales, distribution type of jobs. Today, we see digital channels are increasingly used for sale of automobiles. Tesla's direct-to-customer model is giving jitters for auto industry dealers. We are actually having a program with Toyota to reassure the dealers that they will continue to have a role to play in the auto ecosystem. So some marketing, sales, distribution type of jobs will go away. Manufacturing, I spoke about the shift to electric vehicles. That's a big nightmare for business leaders. What will those people who have spent their entire career, there are people who have spent decades in internal combustion engine based automobile manufacturing, what will they do? Some support functions. These are jobs that are going to go away. But again, I don't want to paint a negative picture. It is actually a shift of jobs. At the same time, there are new jobs that are getting created in software and IT, in analytics, digital marketing and sales. These are the blue dots that you see. So net, there's going to be, depending on the industry, a positive or negative growth of jobs. But most important, again, this is the demand supply gap that I spoke about initially. The only way to plug that gap is by reskilling people on a large scale. So this is a very specific automotive industry example on how the shift in employment is happening. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. So one way to manage this as individual for you is what I would initially I said we'll talk about how can you plan your career. So one way to plan your career is a T-shaped career, right? Depending on whether you want to take up a technical role or a managerial role. So if you want to take up a managerial role, what I would say is the horizontal axis is the digital skills, the digital tools that you need to pick up. At the same time, yeah, so what is a career? This is a dictionary definition of a career. It is taken up for a significant period of a person's lifetime with opportunities for progress. So progress today could be horizontal, it could be vertical. And this is how your career progresses. Now, next slide. So let's talk about a T-shaped career. When we talk about a T-shaped career, you need to focus on both breadth and depth, right? There is a certain amount of breadth which you need to pick up so that you don't limit yourself only to one area. If you look at technology, it starts with basic spreadsheets, big data analysis, depending on how deep you want to go. That's the breadth you pick up. At the same time, you need to go deep into certain domains. In my case, engineering and manufacturing is my domain of interest. So that's where I started going deep. So this is a T-shaped learning career, something you should keep in mind as you think of your career. It's both, you can flip it depending on what type of career you want. Do you want a technical career or do you want to become a subject matter expert? Whatever it is, so technical skills are very important today. You need to know the basics of certain technologies, maybe as simple as spreadsheets. How do you do optimization or using an Excel spreadsheet? How do you write macros? So that would be the breadth part. The depth part is when you go deeper into a specific, into a particular industry that you are interested in. Yeah, next slide. So one way to plan your career is where you need to identify the ikigai, right, or the purpose of your life. So I'll come to this slide, but let me talk about the purpose of life. So we looked at a T-shaped career. Along with that, what you need to think about is how do you identify the purpose of life. So there is a nice looking Venn diagram, right? You know Venn diagrams with 3 or 4 circles. So the first two circles are, the first circle is what you're passionate about in doing, right? And the second one is what you're good in doing. So if you take my example, let's say I'm very passionate to play the violin, for example, or to sing vocally, but I know that I'm not good at it. So there is no point in chasing that. I may still do it for a hobby. But when we talk about a career, identify what you are passionate about doing, identify what you're good in doing, and at an intersection of both is a very sweet spot. And as we say, if your hobby becomes your job, you don't have to work even for one day, right? So many of us have discovered that passion. It could be as an entrepreneur, it could be as a scientist, it could be as a subject matter expert in whatever industry you are in. And even more better is if you add a third circle, which is what the market needs, right? So you get a better pay, there is demand in the industry. So if you draw these 3 circles, right, the first one is what you're passionate about, the second circle is what you're good in doing, the third one is market dynamics. And if there is an intersection of all these three, that's the best sweet spot that you can find. That becomes the ikigai or the purpose of your life. So this is what Professor Clayton Christensen from Harvard Business School said. How will you measure your life? Right? So he said the single most important factor in your happiness is the relationship which you have with your family and close friends. So at this stage, you may be very passionate about your career. You may be very ready to work long hours. You may be ready to slog it out. But here, along with family and friends, you can add your professional network also. But I'm not giving any advice, but make sure you have a balanced life. Health will be very important. You'll realize it later in your stage. So I'm not here to talk about health part, but and Professor Christensen also says it's not just the money or the designation, but it is a positive impact you have on people around you. So that's where identifying this ikigai or purpose of life will be very important for you. Yeah, we'll go to the next slide. So Steve Jobs made a very popular statement in the convocation ceremony in Stanford University. He said, "Stay hungry, stay foolish." Right? It's a very popular statement. All of you would have heard it. So an equivalent of that, which I would say, is stay curious, stay network. For those of you who believe in lifelong learning, the only way to start lifelong learning is to stay curious, ask questions, whether it's in the classroom or when you meet somebody from the industry or when you discuss among yourselves. Don't accept the status quo. So ask questions, and the only way to do that is when you stay curious and stay network. You will realize that the network of friends with whom you spend time in XLRI, that's going to be very, very valuable for you. So stay curious, stay network. So I take this opportunity to wish you all the best for your career. We go to the next slide. So this was the initial question which I asked you. I asked you, why does Apple do most of its manufacturing in China, right? So some of you might have said low cost labor, cheap labor, better infrastructure, but it's actually because of the skill sets that are available. So this is exactly what Tim Cook said. So when a journalist asked him, why are you doing all your manufacturing in China? Again, this was pre-pandemic when China was popularly known as the shop floor of the world. But now, because of supply chain disruptions, companies are de-risking. They're doing a lot of localization. But the key message here is that Tim Cook says all manufacturing for Apple happened in China because of the skill sets that are available there. So that's a very important point, because Apple, as you know, has very precision products that are made. It needs a lot of accuracy, a lot of robots are used, a lot of automation is used. So it doesn't stop just with good product design. You need to practice design for manufacturability. So that's where Apple demands a lot of highly accurate, precise manufacturing practices which use robots. Right? And Tim Cook says these type of skill sets are readily available in China at an affordable rate, obviously. So he says that's the reason why Apple has been doing its manufacturing in China. So it's not because of cheap labor or infrastructure or any tax benefits. So who better than Tim Cook himself who says this? So again, as future leaders of India, we need to think about it. How can we transform our education system, the learning and development practices that are available in industries today? So every business leader today is thinking about how to reskill their team, but they are obviously struggling. So we need to have a skill set based focus. So with that, I'll stop my session. Some of the key takeaways for you on how do you practice lifelong learning is to start practicing active learning Don't be just passive learners. And still better is when you start practicing intentional learning, then you need to focus on practical skills. Just earning degrees and certificates is not enough. That is also important. That's just a starting point. You may do some courses on MOOCs. Many people are doing it today, but it's very important to practice what you learn in those new courses. And then think of it, introspect and identify the purpose of your life. Align your career according to that. And as business leaders, identify areas for automation. We looked at the 2x2, which is a modification of Charles Perrow's classification of technology. So identify areas for automation, reskill people who are at a very reskill people who are in roles that are at a high risk of getting automated. There you'll have to start thinking about skill development on a large scale. And like I said, all this has to be done for you individually and also for your team, whether you are going to head large organizations or whether you are going to start your own enterprise as an entrepreneur. Just keep the triple bottom line in focus. These schools teach us a lot about profitability, how do you come up with a better bottom line once you earn your revenue. But today, good leaders also think about the planet part. Sustainability is a topic of its own. Let's not get into that at this point. And most importantly, the people part. So today, what's the point in having businesses if employability is not there? So the people part is also very important. So keep the triple bottom line in mind, and practicing of lifelong learning will help you take care of the people part, both for you individually and also for your team members. So with that, I once again thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to talk about this interesting topic. So I've shared my LinkedIn profile. Very happy to stay connected with all of you. I keep reading and writing and speaking about this topic in multiple channels. Very happy to stay connected with you. So again, I apologize when this background noise did not go away. Some unexpected travel came up, so I had to take this from a resort. So apologies for that. I hope it was bearable. So I'll stop here. I have time if you have any questions.
Guys, do you have any questions? Yes, Mohit, you can go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm audible. Hello.
Yes, Mohit, you're audible.
First of all, sir, thank you for this insightful session.
Yeah, please go ahead. I can hear you.
So my question is, most of the hard skills and soft skills that we have talked about for a lifelong learning were applicable for the educated section of the society, basically. Mostly the graduates and postgraduates. So we have a significant section of the society which stays in the rural areas and is illiterate. So what set of skills do you think we can impart to these people to boost our economy, and how do you see the role of social policies in motivating people from this sector for lifelong learning?
Your question was broken. Yeah, your question was broken. So if you heard it right, you said some of us undergo formal education, graduates, postgraduates. Is your question, how do those who don't undergo formal education pick up skills? Is that your question?
Yeah, so my question was, what set of skills do you think we can impart to these people to boost our economy, and how do you see the role of social policies in motivating people from this sector for lifelong learning?
Yeah. So two very interesting questions. One, you spoke about the policy part. So like I said initially, it's like a three-legged stool, right? So individuals, industry, and government. Along with government, you can include education institutions also, policy makers. So it's like a three-legged stool. All three have to act together. So this policy part is again a very detailed one. We may not have time to cover it today. I briefly spoke about national education policy. That's like a stepping stone to start on the policy side, right? And to your other question on what type of skill sets, right? Again, it's a very what do I say, open-ended question. So it depends on the industry. There are several studies which have been done to say what are the skill sets required. Today, there are several agencies which are willing to help people pick up these skills. For example, if you look at Tamil Nadu, there is this organization called Guidance Tamil Nadu, which is like a nodal agency for investments. So many said there are ministries only for exclusively for skill development. So there are many channels funding available to help. So that's where professionals like us can help in identifying specific skill sets. And then there are multiple channels to train people. So I don't have one answer. It depends on the industry. But like I said, there are opportunities for employment, but change is going to happen. So we need to always be on the lookout. It's a very dynamic scenario out there. So I don't have one answer, but it's a very relevant question, and each one of those two things we can go deep into it.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yes, John, you can go ahead, please.
Hi, sir. So my question was in regard to the supply chain. How COVID has impacted the entire supply chain and how every industry is trying to recalibrate the entire supply chain. An example is in the automobile sector where Ford is shifting from maybe a forecast demand method to make to order. So is this going to last even after the pandemic is over? Is this going to be the new thing?
Yeah, very interesting question, John. So that's one of my favorite topics. In fact, a few days back, we wrote a point of view on exactly this topic. And the first trend that we said was this, right? The shifting from make to stock to make to order. So along with that, we have given a few more trends. So my point is, I think this is going to continue. So Ford CEO himself has said that the situation is not going to change. One reason is the chip shortage the industry is facing. So Intel has promised some 20 billion investments in setting up new foundries in US, but water shortage is there. In fact, Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger was in India, I think this week or last week. He met Prime Minister Modi, but he says shareholders will not allow Intel to make any more investments. So chip shortage is one reason because of which this make to order situation, I think, is going to continue in auto industry. Some more trends we have seen. I'll share that link with all of you after this call. So there is a lot of localization of manufacturing as de-risking strategy. There is a lot of consolidation happening in the procurement side. And then if you look at end of life of products, there is a lot of focus on circularity. There is a lot of focus on sustainability. What is the carbon footprint? So auto industry is the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases in US. It overtook even the energy industry last year. So there's a lot of focus in looking at the life cycle of automobiles and how to reduce the carbon footprint at every stage, starting from design to manufacture, procurement. So a lot of changes happening. I'll share this link with you after this call. It's an area of interest for me. I'll be happy to stay in touch with you and give you more details.
Thank you, sir.
So we don't have any more. Okay. Yes, Vikram, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Gautam. Good morning, sir. So I do understand that changes are very essential for organizations to sustain and survive. But then again, for organizations to truly transform, I understand that people who are core to the organization, people who are integral elements to the organization must experience and embrace the change. But
Sorry,
people,
Vikram, your voice is breaking. Yeah.
Gautam, am I audible?
Yes, Vikram, you're audible, but if you
Okay.
can repeat your question, it'll be great.
Yes, sir, I do understand that change is something which is very essential for organizations to sustain and survive. But then people who are already an integral part of an organization are they are necessary to embrace this change so that organizations can truly transform. But then what happens is people are already bound to their comfort zones. So how do you awaken the desire in people to embrace the change?
Yeah, good point, Vikram. So this is a struggle which many business leaders are facing today. Because, like I said, a company like Infosys, we all know MOOCs platform, right? But the problem is in motivating people to do these courses. So the negative side is it's like a sort of threatening thing, right? When people realize that they're going to lose their job, they may pick up these skills. Yeah, okay, great. So I spoke about gamification, incentivizing I was talking about internal job postings when it got disconnected. So generally managers like to hold on to their team members. They say we have trained somebody on certain skill sets with certain clients, right? In some areas, I don't want to lose them. So that's where managers need to be trained to let go of people. This internal job rotations is very important. All of you would have heard about this great resignation that's going on, right? So globally, one reason is the pandemic. The attrition numbers have hit the roof. Indian companies are also facing this issue. So that's where, as managers, we need to not cling on to our team members. Right? Today, whether you are an individual contributor, many of you have done managerial roles before your MBA, you're going to do it later also. So we should learn to let go. As managers, we all belong to one ecosystem of professionals. So internal job postings is one more reason. Many companies, people say, I had this other offer, but my manager did not let me go. Because of that, I quit the job. So that could be one reason. These are some things which I can think of to this question on how can we really practice skill development and how do we make it effective.
Sir, if it's okay with you, we can take the rest of the questions offline. We'll send you via mail if it's fine with you.
Sure. I'm fine with both. I have time. If you want, we can ask now, or you can do it offline also. I'm okay with both.
Sure, sir. So we'll collate the questions and send it to you via mail offline.
Sure.
I'll just deliver the vote of thanks. So on behalf of the XLRI
Sure.
batch of 2021-22, I would like to express deepest gratitude to you for taking out your valuable time for this session. I'm sure each one of us has taken key valuable insights from this session. Sir, again, once again, thank you so much for taking out the time for this session, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, Gautam. The pleasure has been mine. Thank you for reaching out. Thanks for the opportunity to share my thoughts. Very happy to stay in touch with you. Thank you so much. All the best for your career. Have a nice day. Thank you, Priyanka. Thanks for coordinating. Bye.
Thank you, sir.